Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Lukas Kendall. This is my friend Charlie Vignola, and we
Okay.
have been doing this as a talk show on YouTube about screenwriting the past couple of years. We've taken a break, and part of that was from me being depressed that like we would do these talks, and I thought we had very useful advice for people, and we get like 200 views. And then we had some interviews with like a lit manager and a really cool director, maybe got 300 views. I didn't have the energy to promote it. And to really do it properly, we would also need to do a podcast, which would double the technical work that I would have to do. Um, so, and Charlie, we just, our lives are busy and we have to schedule these and coordinate them. So, hi, Charlie, how are you?
I'm okay, Lucas.
All right.
Um, Lucas is right. We've both been it's been kind of busy for the first half of this year on a bunch of different levels. But Lucas and I still stay in touch, and we said, it's been a little while since we've done one of these, and there's all kinds of interesting things we should be talking about that we do talk about in private phone calls. So let's kind of like put it online and see if y'all find it interesting. I
All
can't
right.
believe I used the word y'all.
I know.
Okay.
So I I made a mistake in the past few weeks. I thought that let's bring the show back and let's do something I had always thought might be cool, might be cool to do, which is to give people actual feedback, have it be like car talk and about their scripts. And we had hesitated in doing that because we were concerned about the liability. Because the last thing we want is 10 years later, somebody says, I pitched my idea on your show, and then you did a movie of it. And it's like,
It's not just that.
yeah.
So as many of you know, I worked for Jerry Bruckheimer 32 years in development, and there were a handful of occasions over that time where you know I made the good deed of reading somebody's material who wasn't represented, didn't have an agent, didn't have a manager, somebody because it seemed like either the idea was intriguing or it's just trying to do a good deed. And what's the cliche? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, that kind of thing. No good deed goes unpunished. And in a couple of those cases, um, people had a hard time with uh, hearing the truth about their material. And, not that I was doing it in a mean way, but it turned out to create, some issues. And certainly there were liability issues. So I worked for a company like Jerry Bruckheimer, who, under normal conditions, had to deal with all kinds of, issues regarding submissions. And I just didn't want to make the situation worse.
Yeah,
So I,
it's a minefield. So, but I still thought it might work. So I created a release form where I just stole a manager's release form, and I had people fill it out to as a liability release. And then 15 people sent me their scripts, and I started to look them over, and it's quite likely that some of those 15 are like, hey, what happened to that? And what would you think of my thing? And it wasn't that I hated anything. It's not about liking or hating. It was that the process of actually giving them feedback would not have been productive because there's sort of no way to win. Either it was so amateurish that all we're doing is saying a million things wrong with it, in which case, why are we like making this person feel bad in public? I mean, it's awful. Like, so then they're going to they have to watch that and have that be on the internet. People like saying why their script sucks. It's like it's not anything I want to ever be known for. I don't want to do that to anybody.
it's
Or
also if you, the audience, are not familiar with the script itself. It
yeah, it
was
makes no sense. So we'd have to give you the script too, and then we'd have to go through it and say, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, here's why, and this is bad, and this is all. Because it's not a matter of like, oh, this is perfect, but you just need to fix that thing in page 23. It's like they are fundamentally, they're just amateurs. They're just an apple and we need an orange, and it's too complicated to explain the difference. And it's not fair to use your script as a guinea pig. And then in a few cases, there were things that like had a halfway good idea. They had some craft. You could tell the person's been writing a while. And you're sort of also then putting people in public on display in a kind of way. Or if it's actually a viable script, like let's do it behind the scenes and say, oh, you really need to fix this up, and here's how to do it, or here's how we think. And in fact, I had a call. So that we got like 15 or 16 scripts, and one of them had been like optioned by a production company. It was a pilot, and there was a really cool pitch deck. There was clearly a lot of thought had been put into this material. They had years worth of stories, and but I still, there to me there were things that I would have done differently, much differently, that I think were problematic. And the short of it is that I think it was too complicated. It wasn't told in a clear enough way. There was issues with the mythology. There was issues with the tone. There were a lot of issues. So I talked to the writer and said, I didn't say what my issues were, but that if we did this, I'd rather have you there to sort of defend yourself, but at the same time, um, I don't want to just ambush you with all this stuff, and think it over. And he got back to me and said, I don't want to do this. And I was like, that's totally cool. I totally understand. So it kind of left me in a place where, again, I don't know how to do this. And what it really left me thinking is that it's kind of the inverse. I forget which famous Russian writer said this. Maybe you remember that all happy families are alike, and all unhappy families are different in the same way, unhappy in different ways. Who is that? Chekhov or Tolstoy or one of them? It's one
I
of
don't
them.
know.
But
Yeah.
you know the saying. And it made
Yeah.
me think that the scripts are the inverse of that, because the ones that are good are all, they're like, how they found that way to success can be unique. They found a concept, they found a tone, they found a moment in the culture, they found a character, they found a way to resonate through all this weird alchemy. But that a lot of the scripts, when they're bad, are bad in the same ways, which is that the characters aren't believable, the plot is too complicated, the concept, which is your thing, is boring, or the concept's too confusing. So it would be a version of complaining about the same thing over and over again. And
Yeah.
it left me to the point where, I really, I felt bad that we might have led on some writers. And but I still would like, I can't wash my hands of it, because I see this, the whole internet's full of more and more of these, access programs and courses, and learn screenwriting, and here's our YouTube seminar, and here's this seminar, and it's all
Right.
give me money. And it's I can't stand it. And I'm a capitalist. Right behind me are boxes of CDs that I'm soundtrack CDs that I sell to people, because I used to publish Film Score Monthly. I am known for amongst the soundtrack collectors, and I make some money, and I make the people who are selling the CDs money. So I believe in making money, but it has to be honorable. When there's a natural disaster, you don't just price your water bottles to $100 because people are desperate. You have to. There are ethics in being a capitalist, and
One of the ethics,
yeah,
and one of the reasons why I did what I did, and threw up a shingle and became, in addition to writing and producing, occasionally did some script consulting, was for exactly what Lukas is talking about, which is, when I was working at Bruckheimer, I found out about all these screenwriter messenger boards on Facebook and things like that. And I saw how many people were hawking services and coverage and consulting and all these things. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Who are these people? And I would look into it, and I was just flabbergasted that none of these people had any actual industry experience. So I was wondering, where are they getting their confidence to tell anybody this is what you need to do, this is how a screenplay needs to work, when they never did that for a living themselves, which is the whole point. If you're going to go to a coach, you want a coach who's trained professional athletes, or somebody who has some record of industry experience, or something. So yeah, like Lukas is saying, I kind of started doing this because I got pissed at the amount of I don't know, con men, charlatans, operations that were just sucking money from people, but were not really providing a useful service. Now, coverage and consultations are two different things. I'm sure a lot of you know what coverage is. It's a book report for a screenplay. It's like 3 or 4 pages, maybe, but it's the thing that when a script came into Bruckheimer, and early on, the first thing I did for Bruckheimer was I would write coverage, and coverage is literally just a one line, a log line. This is what the movie is about, one line of comment summary, which is this is the basics of why it's either good or bad, a page to a page and a half that synopsizes the story, so a person who didn't read the script could know what the plot was, and then about a page to a page and a half of comments of like, this is why it's good, this is why it's bad, this is why you should pay attention, this is why you don't need to worry about it. So that coverage is one thing, and that's still done at production companies, still done at studios. Then there's development. Development is what happens when you're lucky enough to either option or sell your screenplay to a professional company, and then they work on the screenplay for a long time to get it in shape, to get it ready for a studio to either greenlight it or not greenlight it. And so that process, which is much more detailed and in depth than just coverage, because it's interactive, it's dynamic, you're actually talking to the writer. Usually there's a couple of different development executives working with the writer. That process is what I do when I'm working with writers. So yes, you can be in a classroom where one teacher is teaching a bunch of different kids, and maybe you get to answer some questions, but a one-on-one intensive where you're working with somebody who's developed billion-dollar movies, that's harder to find and impossible to find if you're on like these Facebook Messenger boards. Again, just look at who the person is. It's easy enough to go online, it's easy enough to find out what they've done and where they've worked. So if you're going to do that, and again, the people who actually have the experience, most of them are not doing it full time. I don't do it full time, but like when I do it, it's intensive. When I read a script, I don't know how long.
I have questions about.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So, and you don't do written reports. You do like a Zoom meeting where you give your feedback, and it's interactive.
Well, yeah. Basically what I do is I spend at least a day to a day and a half, like a full day of reading, rereading the material, marking up notes on the script itself. People would send me a PDF of the screenplay, so I'm using my iPad and I'm making copious handwritten notes about everything. And again, like I said, I read it a couple of different times. And then we have a discussion, an online video conference call, where we just go over everything chapter and verse in great detail. So it's not a monologue. I'm not just sitting here talking for like an hour and a half. We're asking questions.
So here's my question. So how many of them in the last 6 months do you think you've done? Do you mind saying?
A couple dozen. Again, I'm not full time, so I'm doing it.
Right.
When.
No, I asked because of those. Let's say there are 30 of them, and like of those 30, how many would you say when you looked at them, it was clear this was like the first or second script somebody had ever written, and it's just it has all the hallmarks of.
Honestly, it's been very varied. Like there have been a handful that have been professional writers. Well, not a handful, actually. It is kind of like pretty broken down. Like there's a lot of professional writers who ask for feedback because they're writing an assignment, or they're getting ready to go out as a spec, or they're getting closer to production and they just want to get like some honest to goodness sounding. I need an objective sounding board from my material. So there's a lot of produced writers, a lot of people working on television shows and movies and things like that. So there's those people. Then there's intermediate people who have optioned a piece of material, people who haven't had any produced material yet, but you can tell that they know what they're doing. They're just kind of a step away from getting to the point where they can get it over that final hump, and they're looking for the same thing, which is like what am I missing? What am I not seeing in the material that I'm working on? And that's useful. And then there are people who are newbies, first-time writers, people who have written like their first screenplay, and even that varies. Where some of them get formatting right off the bat. They've read enough screenplays, or they've read enough books, or whatever, and it's like I don't have a million comments about like how off all the formatting is. But then some people, everything is off, and like that one, I don't fully understand. Like if you're writing a screenplay, there are sites like Script Slug and others where you can read modern professional movie and television scripts, and you can see what formatting is like, and read enough of them. the formatting starts to sink in.
All
So
right.
it's really across the board.
All right. So next question. So I want to leave aside the people where it's their first or second script, because
Mhm.
it was so long ago for me that
Yeah.
I can't quite. Uh, I'm just not in that headspace. And
Yeah.
I think if I were to see something like that, for me, it's not a case of actually responding to the script, but just saying, like, you tried to cook that pizza in a freezer. I recommend cooking it in an oven. It's like it was so, their things were so mistaken, and just you're trying to put them on the, this is not how any human beings speak, or this is,
Yes.
and it's not, and I feel it's, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, because
No, but by the way, when that happens, and it does happen,
people
then
are
it
usually
becomes
very cool, actually.
no, then it becomes a crash course. Then
Yeah,
it becomes, I'm working with somebody that's at that level. Um, the whole point is that you're coming to me because you're looking for that kind of guidance.
right.
So my job is to basically say, this is how it's done. This is how the formatting is done. Here's a couple of sample screenplays that you should look at. I'm going to show you on the page, writing in the notes. This is how it should be looking professionally. And so working with me will be the equivalent of like reading screenplays and doing your own studying for like 6 months to a year
Okay.
in a very condensed period of time, because that's the point of what we're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and we could go back to that, but the people who you'd say in the middle, who are
uh,
like, they're maybe
Intermediate.
finalists in contest, or maybe they're lucky to have a producer interested in something, and they're trying to get a manager, or maybe they've had a manager, or they have a crummy manager.
Yeah.
So what are the commonalities? Like, what are the things that they need to work
Well, again, those are the people where, and frankly, you read those kind of scripts professionally too, which is whenever we used to get screenplays in from agencies and managers, it wasn't like they sent us stuff that was unreadable, meaning that they understood formatting, they understood how to write stage direction, they understood, generally speaking, how to write character and dialogue. It was just, it was off. It wasn't, the dialogue wasn't really great or memorable. You mentioned, a big thing for me is, if the idea isn't great from the beginning, if I don't hear the concept, if I don't hear that premise, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to read that idea, it's already an uphill battle, because that's the thing I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to go in and talk to Jerry. I'm going to have to talk to my colleagues, and they're like, what's the script about? If I can't say the script is about this cool thing that immediately grabs their attention, and I'm tap dancing too much trying to explain what it is, I'm already losing them. They've got too many other things that they're worried about. So that's a thing. Like, a lot of intermediate scripts maybe are about somebody who knows how to write a script, but their idea is generic or middling, or just not exciting, flat. And so it's like, yeah, you can write a script, but Jesus, like, this idea is, nobody's going to be interested in this idea,
I
or
see a
no.
lot of I see a lot of frivolous ideas.
When you say frivolous, describe what you mean by frivolous. What does that mean?
Like, uh, a kid has to do a bake sale to save his school. It's just like, it's
Yeah,
not. I
that's
don't
a.
mean to belittle people trying to save their schools, but it's too. What
It's
is?
not a. It's not a big idea. It's not a dynamic idea. It's not a tantalizing idea. Like, again, you can write something like that. It could be a Disney Channel movie, right? I mean,
Yes.
if there was a if the story was about these characters have to do a bake sale because the thing they need to do the bake sale for is big and important and emotional and and funny, whatever, it's not really about the bake sale, right? It's about
Right. I mean,
the.
if Greta Gerwig wrote Bake Sale, we think that would
No,
be
I'm
really great. It'd
saying,
probably be great.
right. That's the point. Like, you can make something small big, and it's about the execution. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, generally speaking, and this is the reason why, when it comes to pitch fests and things like that, I would, early on, I would go to those things, and it was like staggering to me what some people thought were good movie ideas. Now, again, I've done it for almost 35 years, so I've internalized a lot of this kind of stuff, and that's the reason why, as we're talking about, when somebody comes to me for script consulting, the first thing that I can do when I'm talking to them, which maybe other people wouldn't do, is say the problems with your idea. It's like maybe the writing's great, but the idea is not amazing. And the problem is you're never going to get anybody to read how good your writing is if they're not going to solicit the material, because the idea sounds meh, boring, generic, derivative, all those kind of things. So first and foremost, I think you have to lead with, your best idea. And that might be hard to do in a vacuum, because unless you get feedback, unless you're, and a lot of first time writers, as Lukas and I know, maybe a lot of you're worried that Hollywood is going to steal your idea. Let's talk about this for a moment, because I find this very interesting. So I'm the first proponent of Hollywood doesn't really steal ideas, right? Because they don't have to. Number one, they've got plenty of money, and if they like your idea, they'll throw 25,000, 50,000 your way, which is nothing to them, to like get the rights to it if they like the idea. Second, there's a lot of competitive development in Hollywood. You might think you're the only one that came up with an idea, like a guy who suddenly decides to say yes to everything, right? It's such a novel idea. You've never seen it before. Well, I think I told this story once upon a time when I was at Bruckheimer. In the same week, we got 2 book manuscripts, one from London, one from America, with that exact same idea. And one of them got bought and turned into a Jim Carrey movie. But what are the odds, right? I've never, in all the 100 years of cinema, you've never seen that idea. Suddenly 2 of them come in the same week. Not because one ripped off the other. The idea is kind of in the zeitgeist. That could happen. Now, does Hollywood ever steal ideas? Nothing is never, right? It's very rare. And I will tell you that there was a circumstance where myself and a fellow writer pitched to a big producer on a big franchise. And, we developed it with the producer for a while, and then kind of things fizzled out. We didn't hear from them, c'est la vie, we move on. And then a couple of years later, they're making a new entry into this franchise, and it looks suspiciously like things we pitched. Now, the difference with my situation was I had all the proof and all the evidence of physical meetings with the producer and other people, texts, emails, a mountain of corroborative evidence that we had met with this producer, pitched these specific ideas, copyrighted and WGA registered, the treatments that we worked on. It wasn't just a hunch that they borrowed some of these ideas. So when it came time to sort of, do we sue? Do we do a lawsuit? It was not, it's not entered into lightly. And because of where I worked, there was also the optics. I worked for the biggest producer in Hollywood. Do I really want to be going after another big producer that we pitched to? And so it was all very tricky. But again, in my 32 years of experience, that's the only time that something like that happened. And in that case, I had incontrovertible evidence on my side, and things settled. And but it doesn't happen the way people think it does, because again, on the other side of the desk, I worked as a development executive for one of the biggest producers in the world for over 3 decades, and endless people would threaten to sue for almost everything that we did, and they were always, pardon my expression, bullshit. Because the truth of the matter is, I was there on the ground floor of the origin of every one of the projects we developed. I knew if it was an original spec script or if it came out of a pitch. I knew where it came from. So I knew whether or not, we were ripping off some writer in Topeka somewhere, because I was the guy in the room and I saw the whole process. So I know that there are many people who are like, Hollywood stole my idea. And the only answer to that is, well, can you prove that the person you're claiming ripped off your idea had access to your idea? That's a big one. You have to prove they saw your material, not you guess, not, well, I sent it to an agency and that agency represents somebody who worked on the movie. That doesn't work. Did the person who made the movie have direct access to your screenplay? If the answer is yes, and you can prove that through phone records, through text, through emails, through physical meetings and receipts, then the next step is, what are the similarities between the thing that you did and the movie that got made? And if there's enough of those, then you might have, a case that an entertainment lawyer will take. By the way, entertainment lawyers are very loath to take these kind of cases because you do not want to be on the wrong side of these massive studios and producers and production companies. They want to stay on their good side. So you will find it very difficult to find a legitimate entertainment attorney who will take your case unless you come with this mountain
of long story short, it's an imaginary problem.
It does not happen, right? But so anyway, so getting back to the point, you have to be able to test market these ideas. If you have these ideas and you want to write them, then ask your friends, ask your family, ask your writer friends, like, what do you think of this idea? Test market and see, are they excited about it? Do they want to hear more about that one particular idea? Are they jealous, your writer friends, that you came up with the idea? Then you're probably on the right track. But if you're just like, I just think this is a cool idea, and you spend 6 months or a year writing it, even if it's really well written, you're still going to have to get an agent, a manager, a production company, a studio to want to solicit the material. And the first thing they're going to ask, or the first thing you have to lead with is, in so many words, here's the basic idea. Well, if that idea is tantalizing, if it's not exciting, if it's not sexy, then they're not going to solicit it. You need to get them to want to read it. And as Lukas can tell you, it is next to near impossible to get people in the industry to read something from an aspiring, unproduced screenwriter.
Well, I can't get my friends to read things.
Or my wife. So the point is, it's already hard to get anybody to read any material. So what you want them to read something that they're excited about. The idea.
All right, so let me ask, and I don't want, and don't answer if it's too sensitive for your clients. But if, let's say you did 30 consultations, are there any that you would go, wow, call this manager and tell him I sent you? Or is it most of the time like there's talent here, there's it's sort of okay, but you would not get behind it like
that? Again, it's a spectrum. Have there been there have been scripts I've read where I was convinced that this person is a professional, has written a bunch of screenplays, only to find out this is your first script. You've never written any. There's no way. The script is too strong, too well written. The characters are too good. The dialogue's awesome. And it's like, this is literally your first draft of your first script. That's happened. It's rare.
Let me ask you, the people, when it's happened, has it been typically like they were a journalist for 20 years?
Yeah, it's somebody who's like come from another discipline of writing or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's happened. Not always. Again, sometimes it's not that. But and again, like I said, it's rare, but it definitely happens. And when I do that, I'm kind of like awestruck that like I know my first screenplay was unreadable. It took me 7 years and a dozen scripts to get to the point where I could write something I felt comfortable sharing with people. So when I stumble upon that in the wild, I'm like, holy cow, it does happen. So
all right. So I want to say a few things. So just in the process of looking over the 15 submissions that we got, people should do this. People should read a bunch of log lines. People should read the ideas from other people. And you can do that yourself on the Blacklist, which is that website where people know what it is. And there's also a company called Coverfly that is part of an octopus of companies of screenwriting services and contests. And if you go to coverfly.com and you look at what they call their red list, RED, you'll see you'll just see it's an aggregation of hundreds, if not more, of the scripts that have performed the best at contests. So you can click sci-fi features within the last quarter, and you can look at 20 log lines of the scripts that have done well at contests. And what you will find is that it's hard to read more than 5 or 6 of these log lines.
So I haven't been on Coverfly and sites like that, but like, is it hard to find great ideas even there? Like it's just,
well, it's a little bit, yes, because part of the problem is that you have, okay, just think about it logically. Anything that was on there, people do scour those looking for clients or scripts
Yeah.
to produce. So anything that's good, if you were a producer and you found it, the first thing you say, dude, take this off. I want it.
Right.
So anything that's good has been cherry picked off.
I see. Yeah.
So we're probably left with the things that they were the finalist a lot of times in some mid-level screenwriting competitions, but nobody wants to say, all right, I'm a manager, I can work with this guy and we can punch this up and we can sell it because it sounds really cool.
All right. So it sounds like exactly what I just talked about, which
Yeah,
is
so but the problem,
well written, but the ideas are kind of
well, you're not even gonna you're not even gonna know if it's well written because you're just looking at the log line.
correct.
And
Correct.
what you're often going to see is it's not that it's like a girl's doing a bake sale to save her school, but it might be there are too many. There's no concept and too many of them. So it's it's werewolves and aliens and a kidnapping and a love story and the zombie outbreak, and the mistake all in one log line. So or it's just it's all tropes. It's all cliches. And it's like a scientist trying to save his daughter recreates discovers another form of life and then has to save his city.
Right.
So you can't really track it because it's 3 different movies.
Yes. Yeah. Look, that's a good example. Like the alien invasion story, right? There's a million alien invasion stories. So you got to think, if you have an idea for an alien invasion story and you're trying to get Hollywood to buy into it, knowing how many there are, you better have a hell of a twist on your alien invasion story. There better be something that's just so sexy, dynamic, exciting, novel about your take on it.
So this is the point, the takeaway point that I'd like to leave people to. If you just remember one thing, the secret to doing this is not to just add another concept to your concept. It's not to just overcomplicate it so that my aliens are trying to steal blood.
Mm-hmm.
So they steal all the blood banks. So what? Is to find a character and to find something that's cultural and specific that then takes that idea, alien invasion, and sets it out in a way so that you can envision the whole story engine. And it's funny, there's a movie I haven't thought about in like 25 years. It's that old. I can't remember the title. What was that movie about the aliens who take over the teachers in the high school? What was that called?
Faculty.
Yeah, I knew the guy who wrote it, Bruce Kimmel. He came up with the idea that they made it from. So that's an alien invasion movie where the teachers are the aliens, so it's a high school movie.
Well, it's also a hybrid. The Faculty is really the Breakfast Club meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is not a bad pitch.
In a way, that's what I said not to do. It's a concept with a concept, but on the other hand, it kind of it comes out of that feeling that we have as kids that grown-ups are another species, and that they're just trying to harvest our organs, or they're not looking out for us.
Yeah,
so
but
don't trust authority.
Novelty to that idea, as well as what you're saying, is there's a theme, which is like teenagers are always outcast, nobody believes them anyway, and there's an alien invasion going on at your school, so these kids are the people who have to save the day, even though nobody gives them any respect, which is the theme of the Breakfast Club as well. So if you said, well, what was Breakfast Club with an alien invasion, you're like, okay, I can start to see how that could be kind of interesting.
And I think I remember the Faculty didn't make a lot of money.
Well, it didn't cost a lot. It was
Robert cost a lot of money. So it wasn't like a big hit, but it did get made. So what I'm trying to say to writers, I'm like begging them sort of, and it's something I've applied to my own work, is that you have to take the time to workshop your concept and find the right one. You can't, because what people do is they go right into the plotting because it's easy. It's easy to say, well, there's a guy at school, and then bad guys break into the school and somebody's kidnapped, and then turns out the bad guys are working for aliens, and then they have to rob a bank. And it's easy just to add set pieces and tropes, and it becomes confusing, and it needs a passive protagonist, which is the kiss of death. because everybody else is acting upon this. You don't want the movie to act upon your protagonist. You want your protagonist to drive the story. So you have to start with the protagonist wanting something. And sometimes movies work if it's the guy is kidnapped and he wants to be free. So in the sense he was passive in that he didn't want to be kidnapped. But
Well, you're pointing out something else, which is like screenplays are generally about external rather than internal goals. Like novels are mostly about sort of internal things. You can show stream of consciousness. You can spend a lot of time in a character's mind, and that's one of the beauties of a novel. When it comes to a movie, it's mostly about external goals. Now, that's not to say you can't have.
The great movies do. The great movies do both. They really do.
I'm saying you can have a movie like Goodfellas or Casino where you have characters talking, so you get internal information as well.
I don't mean simply the mechanism of hearing their thoughts. I mean the emotional content of their character. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, 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 no. I was just saying that one of the other sort of like quote unquote rules you hear from people is like never use voiceover narration, right? Well, you can use it if it's good. You can use it if
you can do anything.
If it's a dimension beyond what you're seeing. Here's a little tip: if you're going to use narration, make sure it's telling us things we're not already seeing on screen, or if it's commenting on things we're seeing on screen, give us information we would never otherwise know about the thing you're seeing on screen. If it was comedy and there was a person who was like asking out a girl, you can comment on that as long as you're explaining what led to this and why that person is so scared, and you're adding another dimension.
Well, now we've segued into the concept of voice, which is kind of unteachable, right?
Yes.
Remembering the first scene in Fleabag, because the whole the superficial gag of that show, which everybody loved and I loved, is that she would just break the fourth wall and talk right to the camera, and it was great. But the thing about it is that the things she said were so funny and so different and so heartfelt and heartbroken in a way. And I remember the first scene of Fleabag is she's doing this. There's an old boyfriend who comes over and she has sex with the boyfriend, and there's something about anal sex, and then there's something. All I remember is that the last line of it is her wondering, based on this guy's compliment, if she has a huge asshole. Remember it? Don't you remember the opening scene of Fleabag?
Yes.
The guy's complimenting her on how good the anal sex is, so she's thinking, "Do I have a really big butt?" And it's just such a weird, funny, so intimate. It's so intimate, but it's so universal at the same time. And so all you need to do is read the first 3 pages of Fleabag and just go, "Whoa! This is something different. This is somebody who is so attuned to the human experience that we're just going to keep reading because it's so good."
And I've never understood the admonition against narration, because a lot of the movies that I love, whether it's Forrest Gump or Goodfellas, they have voiceover narration. Now, again, it's really incredibly well done. If it's anything done bad is bad, right? No matter what it is. Right. So never say you can't use voiceover narration. Of course you can. If you do it well, it actually is enhancing the material. But if you do it badly, then it's a crutch, obviously. Don't use flashbacks. Well, don't use flashbacks unless your entire movie is a flashback, like, Memento, which is told backwards. Or there are other movies where, like, the flashback structure, like Rashomon, it's important to the story. But if you just use willy-nilly, then don't do that. If it's a crutch, don't do that.
Everything has to start from a character who wants something, and the thing that he or she wants reveals something about the human condition, and then the genre and the tone and the plotting are all going to evoke and be derived from that take on the human condition, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
And I think the other thing I would try to get people to think about is that you have to workshop that, because the first thing that comes out of your head may be perfect for everything. It probably is not. And people get confused because I call the blog that I'm doing that's connected to this YouTube show or podcast, whatever, anti-writing, because screenwriting has so few words. It's like a weird kind of anti-writing. It's not
Hmm.
hard to type screenplays and then have 100 pages of screenplay formatted events. But it's not a movie because you're just adding plot. And the way you're adding plot is using cliches.
Cliches are the way the mind first works. If
Yes.
somebody gives you a situation and you've seen movies like this, right, where everything's the first choice. Somebody gives you a situation and you're watching a movie, and it's like the reason you can predict it is because the person who wrote it used the first choice for everything. They didn't
And
dig
it
any.
and it's not just the first choice. What it is that it's if you have character follow the plot, it's not going to be good. I mean, I guess once in a while. I don't know. But if
What,
you're
what, what do you mean? Define that. What do you mean character
well,
following?
I'm trying to fill up 100 pages, so I'm going to have there's a bank robbery, then it turns out the aliens control the bank robbers, and then they have to break into the spaceship. It's if you're just then okay, well, who's it going to be about? It's like it's about Mary, the bank teller, okay, and so what does she want to defeat the? It's just Mary's just a construct for this cuckoo plot you made.
Right.
Mary
Hmm.
doesn't really have an inner life, and Mary doesn't really. Now we're not doing necessarily an art film where it's about the choices of Mary's life that ended her up working on that bank job, but if you watch there's so many Hollywood movies. You probably were in development executives like give them a dead kid. I hate dead kid backstory. It's so overused, but it works because you're giving. I mean, it's the oldest thing in the book. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. Aliens. She had a dead kid and then goes and rescues an orphan.
Well,
And then
but
she
again,
feels complete
what you're
as a
bringing up, is a trope, right? It's a
right.
convention. And the thing is, it's important. I think it's important whenever you're writing anything in any genre. If you don't already know the conventions or the tropes of the genre, better figure them out. Because
Yeah,
the
but
truth,
uh,
everybody like me is going to know what they are and how you use them. Either you do them really well, you put twists on them. That's going to determine whether you're going to get people excited about it. If you just, again, the first choice, the conventional choices for everything, then the execution is going to be adequate, but it's not going to be
all right.
great.
I have more I want to say about this because what I
Yeah,
know, I used to hate all these things and I tried to avoid them or subvert them because they seemed like such cliches. And what ended up happening is that I lived more of my life and I realized, oh,
that's why it's a cliche.
the reason
Say
they're tropes is because they are universal human things. I can't
yes,
find a girlfriend. I met my wife, but their relationships are hard. Marriage is hard. Having
raise.
kids is hard. Wanting to have kids is hard. Raising kids is hard. Having parents age is hard. Having a relationship with your parents is hard. Having fights
Right.
with your sibling over the family is all these fighting with having a being married and then wanting someone else is thankfully not a
Con-
problem
con-
I've ever had, but
conflict,
it's
conflict
something that
is the
happens to
lifeblood
people.
of drama, right? Conflict is the lifeblood of drama, and as you're
Yeah,
pointing out,
but life
all
is full of these cliches
yeah, hmm
where
right. You
you're
have to execute the cliche. That's what it's about. If
right.
you
So
do it
you
well,
actually
great.
you just have to look truthfully at the cliche, and then what we're talking about is realistic human behavior, truthful human behavior, because it's a universal thing that you go through losing parents, losing loved ones, fighting
Hmm.
with your spouse, and when you go through it, it can be painful and difficult, and they're hard work. But the specifics of the experience and the truth of the experience can be something that you can draw from and kind of manipulate so that it feels real. And then so that's what I've learned is that it's about stripping out the complexity of the plot so that you're only using the things that are real, the only things that externalize the truth that you have lived. And
The
this is
emotion, the emotional
emotion.
truth.
It's not just it's the emotional truth, but it's also the way people fight, the way people are passive aggressive, the way they argue, the way they try to tell, the way they lie. One of the easiest tricks in the book is if you want to is have your character lie about something stupid because then that's how the audience learns, oh, this person's embarrassed by this stupid thing because this person actually cares about this stupid thing.
Yes, I think since all screenwriting is about the art of being concise,
Right.
when it comes to character, the same rule applies, which is as soon as possible in a screenplay and with as much concision as possible, you want to establish who this person is and maybe what their problem or Achilles heel is that we're going to be dealing with through the course of the story. The quicker you can, the better you can do that, either the funnier, the more identifiable and relatable it can be, the better it is. Because if I'm reading that in the first couple of pages, like, oh, I'm in the hands of a skilled writer.
And
I already know who.
and here's what people do wrong. First of all, they don't know how to do this. They don't prioritize the human behavior, because a lot of times I get the suspicion they're writing to escape their lives.
Yeah.
They're wanting
Yeah.
to, their life sucks, or it's complicated, and they
It's
don't.
a form of therapy.
It's a form of therapy, but and it's probably more the case with, this is a generality, maybe wrong, but it's probably more a case with men than women, where they're writing the script that is the thing that they loved when they were 8, that they're trying to recreate in some way. That's what I've learned, is that like the sort of the starter script for men, and it was for me, is the Star Wars epic, the kind of sideways Star Wars. And
Sure.
the beginner script for the woman is like all the relationship problems of this young woman. Like,
Yeah.
all these guys are jerks, and so, because that's where she's at. But men and women process things differently, and that's that's a broad general outline.
And again, the best scripts do both.
Right.
The best scripts have an incredibly dynamic idea, but the emotions are relatable, and that's what keeps you there. And Back to the Future, the big idea is a kid from the 80s accidentally finds himself back in the 50s and interrupts his parents' first meeting. So if he can't get them back together, he doesn't exist. Okay, that's the big idea, right?
Yeah.
But Marty's got his own problem that we know in the first 5 minutes. He doesn't have confidence, right? He's worried he's not good enough. He wants to be a musician, but he doesn't have the guts to send in his tape. This is his Achilles heel. He doesn't have confidence. So when he goes back in time and accidentally interrupts his parents' first meeting and he's spending time with his dad, what does he see? My dad had the same problem I did. He has the same problem. And as a kid, in the first 10 minutes, he sees his dad doesn't have confidence, can't stand up to Biff. He's got all these problems that as a kid, he's judging his father for. So when he goes back and sees his father, wow, I completely identify with my dad, because when he was my age, he had the same problems. And if I don't solve this problem, I'm going to have the same problems when I grow up.
I'm not even going to exist anymore.
Right. So it's like literally,
so
it's physical, it's emotional. I literally won't exist, but the problem that I had at the beginning of the story gets solved because I see from my father an echo of me and my father, and it's emotional. It's really emotional. The moment when they make up the scenario, you're going to come in and interrupt the kiss in the car, and you can pretend to be a hero so you can get the girl you want, and then it becomes a real moment of like sexual assault. And when the father belts Biff, it is one of the most satisfying moments in a movie, because you feel that moment when she looks up at him after he's punched the bully, and it's not fake, it's real. That emotion just carries you through the rest of the movie. That's what you have to do. So it's not just a great novel movie idea, but the emotionality of all the characters is really well thought out.
Very well, yeah. It's all worth studying. By the way, my daughter, who's 9, who watches those movies, my daughter says they should make a version of Back to the Future where they're all chickens, and then the Marty chicken goes, "Nobody calls me human."
That sounds.
He's 9. Come on.
That sounds like a great joke for the right age. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I find it funny, yeah. So,
right.
All right.
So it's not either or, right? It's not either or. It's not you have to write great characters that feel emotionally real, or you come up with a great movie idea. You have to do both. You have to have a great idea.
They need to be married. So if we're doing our story about Mary, who works at the bank, who got kidnapped and then has to fight the aliens, what you would learn, what you and I would see right away, is that it's too much stuff. Just have Mary be kidnapped by bank robbers. That's dramatic enough.
Or what's the indie idea? What's the indie idea of Mary?
I don't know.
Mary is quiet. Mary
Yeah.
never takes risks. Mary is a doormat. Mary has a boyfriend, but Mary never stands up to him. Mary lives a quiet life as a bank clerk in a small town, and she knows that her life is going nowhere. And one day, Mary decides, I'm going to rob the bank.
All
I'm
right,
going to
yeah,
rob
sure.
from the inside out. I'm here. I've been paying attention quietly. I'm wallpaper. Nobody pays any attention to me. You know what? I think I could get away with this. And there's a guy at the bank that I work with who's equally kind of like shy. And the two of them start trying to put this plan together. That's
Well,
like a comedy.
what was the Chris Pine and Ben Foster bank movie? Texas.
Which one was that? Was that, I don't
You know which
remember.
one I mean.
You would Helen High.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's a drama. So I'm talking about like this is the Little Miss Sunshine indie comedy version of this idea.
Well, that's harder because bank robberies are just so hilarious. I mean, so.
Well, I'm saying like there's Dog Day Afternoon, there's Inside Man, so you're basically doing sort of like the small indie version of a movie like Inside Man. Put it this way: if somebody pitched that to me with that main character and that setup, I'd love to see how that movie turns out. I'm really now interested in reading about Mary, who's this mouse who like so many people can identify with, who's just kind of living her life, but nothing exciting is going on. And like for the first time, like risky business, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to do something kind of crazy. And you're rooting for her because the bank manager's a jerk. And the bank itself took advantage of all these people with these crazy mortgages. You establish in the world that she's a cog in a big machine. And I mean, this is how development works. This is literally how development works. So now you talk about the movie about Mary, who's the mousy bank clerk who masterminds, a bank robbery from the inside out with this, group of people and
All right, wait
decides
a
that.
minute. Let me ask you something then. All right, it
Yeah,
also brings to mind like, why are we doing this publicly and just
yeah,
So now do we have somebody goes, hey guys, I wrote your Mary idea. It's like, well, what? How do we figure this out legally?
please, yeah, go for it.
Or go for it, whatever. So okay, here's what sticks. This is what I get hung up on.
Yeah.
If Mary is so meek, then where does she get the moxie I mean, how does she do?
In
You
a
can't just
movie like this,
improvise bank robbery.
in any movie where a character is like a wallflower who's pushed too far, you need to have the galvanizing moment where that person decides to themselves, whatever that Rubicon is, that they decide I can't take this anymore. If I marry my high school sweetheart who works at the local like mill and is a foreman, and I'm going to get pregnant in another couple of years, and I see my sister who already has the bratty kids that are driving her crazy and she gained weight, and like I'm just going to like die in this small town like everybody else I know, and I don't want this to be the case. And suddenly she's like watching the news, or she sees a story about like some crazy Swiss bank heist or whatever. Somehow it has to be she comes up with the idea that this is something that she's going to consider doing, and like you have to establish that you're rooting for her, but like the bank itself is obviously a little corrupt, and the guy
Hey,
who's
I'm bumping on the reality of this.
The reality of why she would do it.
No, the reality is of if her problem is that she's too meek,
No.
and then if she solves the problem by getting some confidence, why is she going into something so reckless and stupid and dangerous as robbing a bank?
Okay, well then you have to figure out a personal reason why the bank itself is a problem. Somebody
Yeah,
that
but that's cartoony. What I would do, see, we're arguing
well,
about
comedy, right?
project.
We're
Huh?
talking about this. We're talking about this as a comedy, not a drama.
No,
drama,
but I don't do it that way. I mean, all the stuff that I write that's comedic is more grounded. I mean, okay.
well, I mean,
what I'm saying is, what about this?
Hold on.
Right.
Let me ask. In Dog Day Afternoon, do you watch Dog Day Afternoon?
I love it. I haven't seen it.
Why is Al Pacino robbing the bank? Do you remember why?
His spouse can get a sex change, right?
That's the whole. He's doing it because for an emotional reason, which is why this? Why not a million other?
Yeah, but they were outcasts. They were marginalized by society, so they're doing this to make a statement and to get back at the entire world that's treated them like shit for their whole lives. So it doesn't track.
So a 20-something woman who's living a life of quiet desperation and is going to die in this small town and is working for a bank that's part of a larger bank that has ripped people off, maybe even like people that she
No, no,
knows.
that's part of it. Here's what I would do. She's the inside girl. So she ends up somehow like you can have a character be passive just for the first, until for the first half of the first act. So somehow somebody comes to her, somebody she barely knows, and asks a bunch of questions about the bank. She's like, "Why do you want to know?" It's like, "Well, don't they suck?" I'm just, just answer my questions. Like, if you were going, she sort of puts together that they're casing the bank and that they're going to bribe her, and then maybe they give her a gift to shut up, and they're worried about her. So it has, if she's getting involved with crime, it has to follow the truth of it, which is that people get sucked into organized crime in this very kind of um, uh, the Faustian way. It's just, you just compromise a little and then a little more, and then all of a sudden they've got you by the balls and you're screwed. So maybe she really wanted a new car. She had to get a new car, and they bought her a new car, and all she has to do is just sort of, like tell them some information about the bank. And then she does that, and then what they really need her to do is turn off the alarm system. She's like, Jesus. Or we're going to tell you where you're. So she gets sucked into this more and more because it's suspense. So
I like that. I like that less because she's not the person who's coming up with the idea. She's working. She's been external factors are working on her rather than it coming from her harebrained scheme, because she's a character who has been, who's never voiced any complaints, who's never stood up for anything, who's lived like a doormat.
We are having a tonal difference of perspective.
Yeah,
you were a studio guy for 30 years.
Yeah,
so I'm saying up with the studio.
I'm saying if you came to me and the pitch was a mousy, quiet doormat of a woman at a small town bank decides to mastermind a bank heist as a way to escape her dreary world, and then I would say to you, okay, well, how do you make that fun, plausible? How do you make it bigger? What are the things you would do to motivate her so that you like her despite what she's doing? There's a million ways, and there's no one right way. You can say, a friend of hers got screwed by a loan that she sold them that turned out to be bad.
That's the easy part.
Easy is relative. If you're doing that in a development meeting at a studio, right, or a production company, there's a couple of different people in the meeting. There's not just one development executive. With me, it was like at least one other person, sometimes two. So when you'd have these conversations, which is why is Mary doing what she's doing? And let's be specific, because we need scenes to explain now why we like her, despite what she's doing being kind of not a great thing. Why are you rooting for a bank robber? Well, wait a minute. There's a million examples where you're rooting for the bank robbers, from Bonnie and Clyde to Dog Day Afternoon. Don't tell me you can't motivate it and make the audience like the person, because that's BS. There's a million great movies that do exactly that. So now let's discuss amongst ourselves, what are the different motivations for the character, and what are the other events that contribute to that make it. And by the way, this is supposed to be funny. We're doing a indie comedy, which is cheap, right? So the sets are the bank and Mary's house, mostly. We're not going to have a million sets. Those are the two main sets. So everything has to revolve around those things, right? And is it going to be, well, we're going to rob the bank, but we have to figure out what's the best time to rob the bank. Is it when the armored truck is coming? Is it like, is there something happening, a switchover of a new manager?
You can work out the mechanics, but
you'd figure out the mechanics.
Structurally, for me, what would happen, as I think of this, what needs to happen is there has to be a romantic angle to this movie. She either doesn't date or has a really boring boyfriend, and one of the bank robbers is hot. Maybe it's not the main guy. Maybe it's the getaway driver is so hot. There's got to be some sort of spark to. There's got to be a romantic spark that makes her think.
The wedding singer love triangle, where the guy she's getting married to or the guy she's engaged to in the small town, who's like the small town, football hero that she dated or something like that.
Well, she's too much of a wallflower. He's just.
We don't want her marrying him because we know her life is going to be like Rose in Titanic. It's all going to be prescribed. She's not going to be happy about it. And then, like in The Wedding Singer, there's somebody else who she either recruits who works with her at the bank, or somebody else that she gets, involved in the case, who is nerdier, but actually we know she should be with him because they get together better than her and her fiance. So you're right. You need to have the romance that's going to blossom during the course of the story, and that's the guy that gets
Right.
involved.
Okay, so, but the main point I was getting at is, to me, in the midpoint of this movie, what she really realizes is that all these bank robbers are idiots. And that the only way this is going to work is if she just takes over. And that's when she becomes the mastermind.
Well, that's your version, where it's external bank robbers who incorporate her, rather than she's the mastermind who builds it from within. Those are two completely different takes.
Well,
So
I like the one for
so
just,
in your version, there's idiots who are trying to rob the bank, and because she's smarter than they are, she co-opts them and becomes part of their thing. That's one version. And by the way, again, there's no right version of this.
right.
Then there's the other version, which is she comes up with the idea, and we see her putting together her team of these misfits who she just knows what they're good at because she observes.
I want the scene when she's in the bank robber meeting, where for the first time in her life, she says, "You guys are all stupid," and she commands the room. Says, "You can't do that. You'll be caught in 5 minutes. The way to do it is this, and the way you do it is that, and then I would do this, and that would work. And screw you guys," because she's finding herself emotionally.
Yeah, I think any version of this story would have to have those scenes you're talking.
Right.
Every version of it would be the mousy wallflower slowly coming into her own, gaining confidence, acting outside of her comfort zone. That's her arc. So whether or not bank robbers are coming from without, or whether she's starting it and building it from within, that is her arc.
This thing writes itself, because what you do is, then eventually, as we get into the third act, there really is there is a super smart, very bad bank robber who she's going to have to, crime movies, there has to be some comeuppance, there has to be some just desserts, where she's going to find there is a criminal who's really bad news, somebody's going to die, somebody's going to get shot, something bad is going to happen. It's just like Goose had to die. Something bad has to happen.
Well, again, this is a tonal question. So, how dark do you get it? If it's lighter,
it's not a matter of dark. It's a matter of natural.
If you're talking about complications, which are what are the things that are going to interfere with the plan? Yes, of course. Right. What's going to happen in any version of this? Let's pull the lens back a little bit. Right. What is the act one? We already know what the act one's going to be. The first 5 or 10 minutes are going to be introduce her character. She's mousy. She's engaged to the high school sweetheart. She never speaks up, even when her food is wrong at a restaurant. You're establishing all these things about Mary, the bank teller. And at the bank, she works, and she's pleasant enough to the people she works with. Her bank manager is an asshole. He grab asses, or he makes comments to her. She kind of tries to laugh it off, but it really bothers her. You've now established Mary, and you've now established this is and her life and her fiance at page 10 proposes at a picnic or something like that, or a 4th of July picnic or something like that, and she just has this look on her face like, I guess I knew this was coming, but I don't really want this life. And her sister's got the kids crawling over her and gained the weight, and I don't want that life. And then you have to establish why the bank robbery, right? Why would this be her idea of all? Or why not just get on a bus and leave and go to Chicago? Why is she going to do this one thing? And so now you have to motivate that. And there's a million different ways that you can motivate it, but it's got to happen by the end of page 10. The seed has to be planted, which is maybe this is not the craziest idea. And then by the end of act 1, she has to say, I am going to do this, and I have a plan. I'm going to put this plan together. Okay, so now we're in act 2. First half of act 2, she's putting together the team. She's putting together these people. She's starting to formulate her plan. This is the way we're going to pull it off.
Charlie, I don't like your version.
Honey, hold on. Let me just, this is again, the broad way that you're starting this. First half of act 2, we're planning the heist, putting together the team. introducing the other love interest. Midpoint, something has completely changed in our big plan. Either the timing is off, they're going to sell the bank, but our timetable has just changed dramatically, so we have to move quicker than we thought, and we're going to have to like come up with ways to deal with these new circumstances. Second half of Act Two, they're trying to like fix those problems. Mary's fiance starts to realize something's going on. Maybe Mary's fiance starts to realize what they're going to do, and he threatens to expose it. New complications are arising. The bottom of Act Two is, this isn't going to work. Somebody we know is going to rat us out, or maybe they have ratted us out. What are we going to do now? We're out on bail, this, that, or the other thing, but it looks like all is lost. And then the Act Three is either going to be, we come up with a way to solve those problems. We do it. We're exhilarated. We're taking these chances. We're going to get away with it. And then you see how the heist ultimately plays out in your Act Three. Do they get away with it? Do they fake their deaths? Whatever it is. That's the biggest, broadest outline possible. So now you're going to fill in the gaps in that structure, because broadly speaking, those are the things that would have to happen in any version of this. We're just niggling over the fine details.
Well, no, I'm niggling. I don't like your version. I like you, but I don't like.
Explain why. No. Now you have to get really specific, because we haven't written the script yet.
Because
we haven't written the script yet. So what is it about that broad skeleton that you're having a problem with? Be very specific.
You're using cliches, and you're not putting. You're not looking at what. You're not making them real enough. It's not real. Like just.
But we just gave a skeleton. We didn't actually write scenes. So what do you mean not real?
The skeleton is based on things that are phony baloney.
Give me an example.
Again, if this woman just wants to be the author of her own life and change things up, and it's like more like American Beauty with her,
right?
Then why does she do something so dangerous and so stupid? And so, I mean, everybody knows bank robbers get caught. In this day and age, with cameras everywhere, my hometown, Martha's Vineyard, there was a bank robbery. They caught the guys in a couple of weeks. Do not rob.
Okay, all right. Now I'll answer your question. She's smart. She knows that. That's a scene in the movie. That's a conversation.
I don't buy it. I do not buy it. Charlie, I don't buy it. If she's that smart, she's going to find a new line of work, and she's just going to say, "I'm going to open a bakery," and she's.
And here's the other problem. You are currently doing something that if you were a development executive, that the guy that came in and pitched The Purge, you would tell him you're an idiot. Get out of here. I don't believe a movie where all crime is legal for one day a year. And
no,
you know what?
That's not.
You would have blown up the franchise, because you would have said, I can't come up with any answer that satisfies my intellect where that would ever make sense. It seems so boneheaded, so stupid. And I would say to you, well, that's the premise. You got to make it work. So you know what? You're the development executive. Find a way to make that work. That's the premise. I don't care if you don't buy it.
No. This is different. This is different. I'll tell you why.
Tell me why.
You, as the writer, can make up anything. Yeah. You could have a world where gravity is upside down. You could have a world where people turn into lobsters, whatever that crazy movie is. You can make anything. Yes, right. But the only thing that you can't change, because the audience will go, "We're out of here," is truthful human behavior.
Right. So what you're saying is, I can't think of a version of Mary, the shy, quiet bank clerk, that would commit a bank robbery when we know that bank robberies happen all the time. People do that. They're not all mastermind crooks. A lot of them are average people who've never done something like that before. And what you're telling me is my imagination can't come up with an answer that would satisfy me.
But I've already told you the version of it that is more believable to that character, and you didn't like it because she's not active.
No, what I said was, since there's no right way to do it, there's the version where she gets sucked into an existing plan. That's one version. I like that version. Or she comes up with a plan herself. And what you're telling me is, I can't come up with a satisfying explanation for a character I would like who's smart that would come up with that as a plan.
But the version of it that.
But am I mischaracterizing that, or is that what you're saying?
Unfortunately, I was thinking of the next thing I was going to say, and I wasn't listening. I would like the version where we all know that moral compromises happen slowly. And I think that it is, if you worked at that, I don't like when you said, and the bank manager is an asshole. I don't like
Well,
that.
I'm
No, no,
speaking
but
from,
let me say, I would love it.
hold on. I'm speaking from experience. Okay. Not, I didn't
What,
get
that
hit
they
on.
are assholes?
I will share something with the audience.
Right.
During the height of the mortgage craziness before the collapse of the real estate market in 2008, a certain wife that I know was sexually harassed by the bank manager, and it became a big thing. And the wife in question wondered what to do about this, because it wasn't just happening to her, it was actually happening to a couple of the other young women that worked at this bank. And the older bank manager got away with this behavior because it turns out he knew the VP of the bank. He was an old boy. They were buddies. And so she was in a position where she had to figure out, well, I need this job. Do I say something? Do I report him to HR? If so, what's going to happen? Because he's the one that's protected, not me. Are these young girls who also need their job, are they going to like go along with me and explain this situation to HR and risk their jobs? And then when this person explained this to HR, they were like, maybe you don't come in for a while. It was like, wait a minute, sorry, he's the one who's grab assing me,
Well,
trying to
look, but I'm not
like,
disputing that a lot of bank managers.
so I guess what I'm saying is that suggestion actually is coming from a place of reality, where if you have to establish why your character is doing something untoward. I'll give you another example. When we were developing National Treasure, I might have stopped me if I've told this story. It was in development for almost a decade before Bruckheimer was asked by Disney, hey, do you guys want to take a crack at trying to make this work? And the premise was always the same. There's a secret treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. That's all we have. No characters, no story, but this is the idea, right? So the problem became, in every iteration of the movie, why do we like a character who's stealing the Declaration of Independence that has a treasure map on the back? Because, well, if all he's getting is a treasure, the Declaration of Independence is way more important. He seems like a jerk. What happens if it's damaged? It's like, it sounds good in theory, but there were a million logical reasons why this script didn't work, why the character wasn't likable. And honestly, they were developing it for literally a decade. And then we took a stab at it, and we had story meetings, and we're trying to figure out, well, how do you construct a scenario? Because Lucas, that's the idea. A declaration map on the back of the declaration. You have to make it work. Mm-hmm. So then I believe it was Calvin Bigelow who came up with the solve. But they said, well, what if it was a historic expert who was working with a treasure hunter, and they find out in Act 1 that there's a treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. And Nick Cage, his character in the movie, realizes this, shares this with the treasure hunter, but also realizes that treasure hunter is going to now steal the Declaration of Independence to try to find that treasure. And he doesn't give a damn about the Declaration of Independence if it gets destroyed, if he has to like break it up to look at
the good guys have to steal it.
Right. So Nicolas Cage's character says, I'm going to report this to the government, to the FBI. So he reports it to the government. They all think he's crazy. Declaration map on the back of the, a map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. And he tries to do the right thing. He tries to let the authorities know about it, but they don't believe him. Okay, so now he's in a position where the bad guy is going to steal the Declaration of Independence. I know he's going to do this. I know when he's going to do it. Oh, holy crap. We're going to steal the Declaration of Independence because I so love history, and I know what he's going to do with it, that I now have to do it. Now, it took a million conversations back and forth to try to figure out a way to make that plausible so that you would root for Nick Cage's character to steal the Declaration of Independence. Because again, I can think of a million reasons why that makes him an idiot, a bad character, whatever, but it doesn't matter. For that idea to work, you have to come up with the one version that makes what he's doing understandable, likable, all that kind of stuff, because your imagination is limitless. You can come up with a million ways. That's the way we cracked it. That's why I'm saying when it comes to Mary being the architect of the plan to come up with the bank robbery, what you're saying is, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, You're saying either I can't think of an answer where she's the one who comes up with the idea that sits right with me, or I just like my idea better. The second answer, that's not an answer. If you're working
No,
in
no, no, no. There is
movie,
again.
if somebody said that you have to come up with a way to motivate it so that it is her idea because that's what the producer wants, that's what Jennifer Lawrence wants,
Right. Look,
then you come up with a solution.
no,
What
I'm
you're
not just.
saying is,
I'm not precious about things.
no, but I'm saying like that's how it would work in development.
Right,
Development,
right. So what? But what I would say is,
yeah,
I don't. The pathway for her to go there has to involve reality, and it has to involve the actual emotional steps. So what if her friend comes out and they're drunk? She hasn't gotten drunk with her friend since college or something, and the friend her girlfriend says, "Hey, how would you rob the bank?" And she goes, "Oh my God, it would be so easy. First I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this."
great scene.
Yeah.
I love that scene. Automatically, I love that.
Right, and
love
then
that
she
scene.
learns that her old girlfriend is in fact in league with these guys, and she has to say, "Wait, you're really going to use
Okay,
that?
all right.
You're
So
going
I'll
to know
tell you.
that's my code. I told
I'll
you
tell
the
you
code."
what you're doing. Tell you what you're doing. All you're doing is transferring the problem onto another character. That's not an answer either. I had this same problem when I was developing a million projects, which was in one of them, there was a character who needed to do something. And we're like, well, I don't believe that that character would do that. And then it's like, okay, you don't believe that character would do that. You can't come up with a scenario that would make that character likable and smart for doing that. And then the suggestion from the producer was, well, what if it was this other character who came up with it? It's like,
No, she
so
comes
you're
up
just
with it.
transferring
I'm
the
not
problem,
transferring it.
saying it's not Mary who's doing it anymore. It's Sally, her girlfriend, who's coming up with the plan with her with these outside bank robbers. So all
Right,
you're doing,
but I already told you.
yeah,
I told you. What happens is that she gets in league with them, and she's trying to talk them out of it, and in the process of arguing with them, gets to the point where she's like, "Let's do it, but do it my way." She
in
takes.
your version, do we like the other bank robbers, the guys who originally came up with the idea?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I think there would be
I guess
something
I'm asking
lovable.
it, are they nefarious, and do we think that they're going to turn on her and kill her, or are
No,
they
but all right, let me go back. I
the
think,
Coen brother character? Coen
yeah,
brother
they're Coen
character.
Brothers characters.
Okay, so the
All right,
Coen
let's
brother
go back
character.
to the asshole bank manager, which I don't like the way you said that, because it's like, I don't want her just being sexually harassed and she's a doormat.
It's not just about that. It's about skillfully contriving the situation so that if
Here's
you
how I
were,
would do it. Here's how I would do it.
yeah, if you were that person seeing these circumstances, you would still root for the person going like, okay, that's not the craziest idea. By the
No,
way,
no,
I haven't
listen.
here's another, hold on, Lucas. Here's another example you can motivate it. And they've done this in a million movies. Somebody that's important to her got screwed over by the bank. She needs money for an operation for a loved one. There's literally a million
I know,
examples.
but we don't need any of that. It's not what I'm talking about. Look, I would not have her boss be a jerk. I would have him be the nicest guy. People say that Sean Hannity's a great boss. We're not a fan, but they say he's a great guy to work for. Like, asks about their kids. He's very generous. He's warm. Just people can have terrible politics and still be nice people. But
Yes.
maybe we want to cut this, maybe not. So I would just have the boss be like the sweetest guy. Like, how was your weekend? Oh, good for you. And then maybe there's a scene where she learns that the boss is going to approve the foreclosure of a nice little old lady that she's known all her life. She goes to the
Sure.
boss and says, "I've never asked you this, but she's such a nice lady. She taught me piano, and I know she's going to get the money. Why are we foreclosing?" Maybe he says, "Look, it's just how the world works, and we're not
Oh,
responsible."
beyond that, it could be they sold her a loan. They knew they shouldn't have sold her because
Yeah,
this
yeah,
happened.
but no, but what I would want is the moment where the guy tries to explain it, and she's like, "Please, please, Phil, can you just go easy on her?" And he says, "Okay, for you, we will." And then she finds out he did it anyway. And
Sure.
he comes back and says, "I'm sorry, I got overruled." And then I think at the 35-minute mark, she's walking past the break room and hears Phil brag about how he had to lie to Mary because she's such a naive idiot. That's how you make him a jerk.
But well, again, that's fine. What we're doing is we're haggling over details. The big idea is how do you motivate Mary to be the architect of the bank robbery in a way that leaves her likable and that provides enough skillfully contrived external situations that coming up with the idea is understandable. All we're talking about right now, all we're haggling over, is the details of that big idea. If you were the producer and I was the development executive working for the producer, and you happen to like that version of how to do it, then my goal as a development executive would be, okay, we've now decided this is the detail you personally like.
Right.
So let's try to make that
Well,
work.
but this comes down to taste. I mean,
hold on.
yeah.
There is no objective answer.
No.
There's objective ones. There's what you prefer. Another thing that would happen all the time with one of my development colleagues who was above me in the food chain was when we talked about a character motivation for something. Let's say it was a villain who needed to steal whatever, right? And we would get haggling over, like, why is he doing it? Why is the villain doing what he's doing? And we'd all discuss, there's a million different things he could be doing it for. And then I would turn to my colleague, let's say his name is Frank. Frank, what do you buy? Money. It's the thing everybody, greed and money. Okay, but let's stop discussing it. Frank likes money. That's going to be the answer now. It's not that money is the right or the wrong answer. It's the one that the producer, the star, the person who has more power in the development meeting decides he likes. And now you work on shoring that up and making that work the best you can.
Well, most writers,
most
writers are never going to meet a development executive. They're struggling.
No, but what I'm explaining is this process of development, which is what people who are now watching this for the last 20, 30 minutes, you're seeing this is how development works, which is we started with Lukas mockingly coming up with the character of Mary the bank clerk and saying, well, there's nothing interesting about Mary the bank clerk. No, unless Mary the bank clerk, who's the shy, wallflower, decides that she's going to engineer this bank heist because this is going to be her vehicle for leaving her dreary world and reinventing herself or taking a chance once in her life. And now what we're doing in this conversation is, okay, how are all the different ways that we can build scenes, create characters, develop obstacles, structure the story? Because bit by bit by bit, if you're paying attention to what we're doing, is we are creating the building blocks of whatever that movie will be. We start broad, and then we kind of like zero in on, okay, now what is the specific? What's the specific scene where she gets the idea for the plan? What's the specific scene where we establish the kind of person that she is and what she's trying to overcome as an Achilles heel? Who are the other characters in her universe? Does she have a fiance? Does she have a sister? And bit by bit, you start building the story. That's exactly what we're now doing. That is how development at a studio level would work with a premise. That's why you have to start with the premise. And again, you don't have to start with the premise. You could start with a character. We actually started with Mary the bank clerk. We had no premise. There was nothing that made it a movie idea. But Mary the bank clerk, the timid bank clerk, who basically puts together the bank heist, and she gets her chance to be, Al Pacino in Heat or something like that. There's something inherently funny and contrasty and humorous about that character.
Well, I think I have a tonal problem with it, because for me,
okay, articulate your tonal problem. What is it?
What?
I said articulate your tonal problem. What is the tonal problem you're having?
Well, I'm mostly having the problem of reality, which is, again, the if she's that smart, like, she's not touching a bank. She knows, don't rob a bank. Everybody knows that. So I think for the reality of it, she has to be sucked in through it the way people get sucked into organized crime, sort of slowly and stupidly. So that's why I think there already has to be these other bank robbers.
But again,
well, wait a minute. But then it has
bias. That's the bias you have, which is smart characters don't commit crimes.
No, smart characters don't behave stupidly.
She hasn't done anything stupid yet. You haven't written the scenes. What are you talking about? You're making an assumption that from the beginning, if this character has decided, you know what, that's it, I've now snapped, I am going to rob this bank and I'm going to put together a foolproof plan to do it. And we see her meticulously putting it together so that we, the audience, go, holy shit, she's going to pull this off. I'm rooting for her now. And then when obstacles come up and complications come up, and she's figuring out along with her partners how to solve those problems, she's not stupid at all. She's really smart.
No, it's fake. It's movie land. It's not my style. It's not my taste. It's just not. I live in the real world, and in the real world, that it just wouldn't. The only way it happens.
In the real world, people who have never committed a crime never rob a bank, or if they do, they're dumb. That's what you're saying.
It is typically, I don't know. We have to look. Yes, if they do, it's.
And by the way, do 100% of bank robberies get solved?
I don't know. They don't look it up.
No, they don't, Lucas. They do not. 100% of bank robbery, maybe 65, 70%, maybe even 80%.
If she's smart, she doesn't like. If she's smart, she doesn't like those odds.
Which is why we see in the movie her making smart moves to avoid those odds. That's the fun of the film. The fun of the film is.
But it's not. But it's not. It's not Ocean's 11. We're not doing Ocean's 11.
But no, you're right. This is Ocean's 11 with a bunch of like quirky misfits in a small town. That's basically what you're saying. That's the big idea. The big idea is taking.
It's not. It's a tonal problem, Charlie. I'm seeing it. I would see it as a character piece. I would see it as more of a Coen Brothers movie.
Okay, so when I say
darker, it's dark. It's dark material.
When I say Coen Brothers and Little Miss Sunshine as tonal examples, you know exactly what I mean. So we're not doing a broad slapsticky comedy.
We're not doing slapstick.
We're doing a small indie character-driven comedy, and you could call it a dark comedy depending on how dark you want the consequences.
I see it. I mean, maybe I see it more of as a suspense thriller. I mean,
yeah, I guess that's the difference. You're seeing it as a suspense. And by the way, that's another perfect example.
Because I think that
Home Alone. I think we had this conversation before, right? Home Alone is about a kid who accidentally gets left home in the house without his parents, and two robbers try to like steal from the house, and the kid is all alone and has to figure out how to thwart them. Now, you could be Lucas and say, "I don't believe that. That's stupid." The parents
because if it's a kids' film, it's a different.
Cops. There's a million examples of that movie doesn't last 5 minutes.
Give me some credit, please.
Let me finish. The studio would go, Lucas, all that may be true. You still have to make the movie work. So let's figure out a way to make the movie work as a light, fun holiday comedy. I know you don't like the tone, but that's the tone that Fox wanted to make. That's the tone.
First of all, that movie was famously put in turnaround, correct?
Right? It was, and that was a mistake.
Okay, but please let me. No, hold on.
It was going back to the Home Alone example. So it was done as a light comedy. That movie was a giant hit. Could you do a movie, Home Alone, as a dark drama? Could you do a movie about a kid who's left accidentally by a single mother or parents who are irresponsible in the home when some, like wait until dark, some really sinister bad guys break into the house because they think they're drug money? Could you do that as
no? And the reason why is because it is completely unbelievable that the family would actually forget to bring their kid.
The father's drunk. Father didn't come home. The babysitter had to leave. There's
I don't care about it. No. If you're already in a tonal world where something ridiculous happens, that they leave a kid at home by mistake, then you could also be in the tonal world with the goofy bank robbers and all the slapstick, because it is it's for a 10-year-old or however old the kid was. It is a kid's film. It is cartoony and externalized.
Are you saying that if
family film?
If producers came to you and said, "We're going to hire you for $150,000," and that's the premise, you couldn't write it?
I would write it.
No, I said, could you write it? Meaning,
yes.
could you make it emotionally, dramatically plausible? Right now, you're telling me all the reasons why you don't believe that a more grounded version of the Home Alone structure wouldn't work as a straight thriller. And I said, if you were hired to write that by a production company and said, this is the idea, would you go, okay, let me think about this. How are ways
I will answer the question, and then we probably should stop because it's been 90 minutes. But look, this is what I'm saying. The movies reflect, the tone of the movie needs to reflect the intended audience, and that needs to connect to the protagonist with whom they are asked to identify. So if we, those who are kids at heart, are being asked to identify with this 12-year-old who is accidentally left at home and then has to fight these cartoony bank robbers, we can do silly stuff. We can have it be slapstick and goofball. It's fine. I would totally do that. Mary the bank robber is 26 years old. Mary, she's not a kid. She's dealing in her job involves money, which is the most grown up of all topics. She is already in an adult world. This movie tonally is for a 26-year-old, single women audience. That's the protagonist, a 26-year-old meek wallflower, and that is who we, the audience, are asked to identify with. So we, the audience, need to already be able to have the headspace to get where she's at. Who am I? What am I doing? Who am I about to marry? What is my job? What is my career? What happens to the little kid in me who's now dead?
Right.
So we are already in a world of going to the grocery store. We are in a world of the life and drudgery, which is what people. I remember being single in my 20s. It's wow, way more of my life than I thought involves going to the grocery store. It's tonally set up for that. And those are the kinds of characters where it is a natural part of their life where, hey, it's Sally from college and let's go and have a drink and that's so fun. And then, hey, is Sally pumping me for information in my bank? Oh, I'm so drunk, I just told her. And next day, Sally, what did I tell you? I didn't actually tell you the code, did I? No. Okay. And then, so she has to start from a point of normality to a point of she loosened up just a bit because she could let in that little kid who likes to drink with Sally, like she did when she was 19 at Swarthmore. And then she's trying to figure out, is Sally up to no good? And in the process of meeting Sally, meets the hot getaway driver. So
again, that is a version. That is one version.
Right? I am the version that speaks to me. And I'm not a 26-year-old single woman, but the version that I could get into would be grounded. And it would be funny, but it would be a dry kind of wit, which of course we know is the best kind of wit. It just would not be Mary the bank robber becomes Lex Luthor, because that is stupid.
All right. So I'll give you an example that completely contradicts everything you just said and is incontrovertible. Risky business.
I love risky business.
Okay. What is the plot? What is the premise of Risky Business?
17-year-old wants to get laid and calls a call.
A shy, quiet, Midwestern high school student who's trying desperately to get into the college of his choice, and his parents are out of town, and one of his friends decides, he's too uptight, and he needs to live a little, get outside of his comfort zone. So he winds up, trying to set him up with like a hooker. And what happens is
an actual hooker.
Well, it's a trans hooker at first, remember?
Oh, right, I forgot.
So there's a trans hooker, and then the trans hooker goes, I know what you want. It's what every boy on the lake wants, and sets him up with Rebecca De Mornay, who's basically his same age, who's a call girl. And what happens with the plot of that's not the plot of the movie. What the plot of the movie is he and his friends, while the parents are out of town, decide to turn the house into a brothel.
No, that is the third act.
You
were proving my point.
The third act is set up through the course of the movie, which is a character who would never, ever, 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 ever use his parents' house as a brothel, does so in the movie. You know why? Because they have smartly constructed the character, the circumstances, the tone, everything. So that when you finally get to the act 3, whether it's a bank robbery or turning the house into a brothel, the steps have been set up.
Right. You have proved my point about
to make that plausible. So at the end, what would you say Risky Business is? A guy falls in love with a hooker?
But the plot of Risky Business, he does not on page 25 go, I think I want to run a brothel. He runs the brothel because he can't afford to pay Lana, so she steals his thing, and in the process of getting the thing, he borrows a car, and then the car falls in the lake, and so he needs the money to pay back to buy back, and Guido steals all his furniture. You know, all the I can't remember all.
There's all these complications.
So
but
he ends up he
I'm
tries.
using your tonal argument, which is a character like Joel would never in a million years be involved in something like what happens in the movie, but we buy it because of the way the story skillfully
Because it has sucked him in. And at every step of that, because of the truth of his character, is he's just trying to fix the last problem that he created, and every problem creates another problem. And it gets to the point where he goes, you know, what the hell? Let's run a brothel because nice friends you got here, Joel. Clean, quick, you know, whatever the line is. It's hilarious. It's a masterpiece. But
right.
So what I'm saying is that I don't want the Disney film where she decides to become Lex Luthor on page 25. I want the movie where she is gradually sucked deeper into this plot to the point where in the third act, she's going to go, I have to rob the bank because that's the only way I can solve my problems is if I make this bank robbery successful.
And the difference between what we're talking about is you prefer that, not that that's better. That is that's your preference.
And so anybody who likes a different version is stupid.
So let's be clear. What I'm saying is there is no right answer to this. There are a million possibilities like the multiverse, right? But it all starts with one simple premise, which is a quiet, meek, small town female bank clerk who is living a life of quiet desperation, becomes involved with robbing her own bank as a way to set herself free, because it's just such a crazy idea that this would be something that like just an average person would be involved with. What you're pitching is simply shifting the burden of coming up with the idea to somebody other than the main character. And what I'm advocating for is it's more interesting for the main character to come up with that big idea. That's the only, and there is no right answer to that. Okay. I could write a script that's mine. You could write a script with your version. They could both work, and they could both be great, and they could both get made. What I'm saying is, what we're doing is, this is when you come up with a small kernel of an idea, and you have to figure out what is the idea. Well, if she's a small town bank clerk, that's not a movie. I mean, I guess it could be, you know, like literally it could just be a drama about her friends and her, and it's kind of, you know, kind of small town drama, but that's not a big idea. If you see the trailer for what we're pitching, which is, okay, for the first 30, 45 seconds, it's the doormat that everybody steps on, suddenly having the lightning bolt of like, I could pull this off. Maybe it's while she's drinking with her friends at Chili's or whatever. However, Lukas pitched it. And by the way, I think that's a really funny version of it. And then you see her and her misfit friends who all are, you know, suffering at this bank. Again, all of them are living lives of quiet desperation. They all have their quirks. And yes, the bank manager, probably you would want him to be an adversary because it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that that would be the guy that would add more fuel to why they're doing what they're doing, which is it's not just a mom and pop. It's not Bailey Savings and Loan in It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah. This is a small branch of like a Bank of America, Morgan Stanley conglomerate. They gave bad loans to people, mortgages, they screwed people's lives. And however you construct it, the bottom line is she and her misfit friends are going to rob the bank from inside. It's like Ocean's 11 in Poughkeepsie or whatever it is. I see that as a movie. And if you came in and you pitched the funny version of that with great characters that are going to get cast, because these are characters that are distinctive and funny and emotionally compelling, well, then that's a movie that gets bought and that's a movie that gets developed. So when you bring that script in, these are the conversations you're going to have with development executives, which are, how do we make these things better? How do we come up with better set pieces? How do we shore up the emotional rationale for why they do what they do? How do we, you know, up the stakes? All those things. But it came from that small kernel of an idea. And if Lukas was the producer, or he was the senior, you know, the senior VP of production, then that would be the reason why you would wind up having that would be the reason why you wind up having it
It'd be a big bomb.
listen, what's that?
Have it be a bit. It would be a big bomb.
Yeah, well, no, what I'm
Right.
saying is, like I explained, there is a hierarchy in development meetings, and if you're a smart writer, you will intuit that as you're having those meetings. By the way, if Lukas and I were partners writing this particular idea, this script, these would be the conversations we would have as we're developing the outline, right? We would have these arguments about, like, what's the best motivation for Mary? Who are the funniest characters to surround her with? How do you broadly structure Act One so that we can grab the audience right away with, like, emotionally compelling but funny scenes? Because again, first and foremost, I see this as very funny. Now, maybe Lukas is like, it's more dramedy than comedy with emotion, and that would be something we would have to negotiate in outlining and sort of like big picture discussions. Maybe his version is more dramedy, and maybe I would say, I'm less interested in that. I want to do the sort of like, it's funny. It's it's a more Coen Brothers, Raising Arizona, Little Miss Sunshine, and you might say, I love Raising Arizona, but it's not real. And you know what? You'd be right. There's like the biker from hell, and it's much more broad. But is the emotionality in Raising Arizona? For sure. I absolutely root for those characters. In the first 5 or 10 minutes, there's voiceover narration, as we just discussed. You establish both of those characters. They're both kind of like broken people. She is a rule-following cop. And the premise of the movie is, we're going to steal a baby. Now, Lukas would argue, maybe not, but based on what he said in this particular show, I don't buy that Holly Hunter would do that. And if I do, I wouldn't like her. Well, you know what? The Coen Brothers just proved you wrong. Yes, of course you can do it.
I wouldn't.
It's about
look.
the execution.
It's not worth arguing anymore. But no, look. If the concept, the tone has to follow the concept. To me,
Yes.
Somebody robbing their own bank doesn't scream, that's hilarious. So, but we got to wrap it up. This has been 100 minutes.
But it's been a good one, right?
It's been fun. We'll see if anybody watches it.
Yeah, you know what? And again, I'm sure there'll be a comment section underneath this. Would love to hear what you guys think about this. If you like this kind of thing, just this kind of like riffing and just coming up with some crazy idea on the fly, just to see, creatively how these things work, we could do more of this kind of stuff. And hopefully this has also been somewhat insightful to get some idea of what the development process at the studio level is like, because this is what it's like, except it goes on for longer than an hour. It can go on for
10 years.
Oh, I mean, just figuring out the rules of how the curse worked in Pirates of the Caribbean, it took weeks of long meetings just to figure out the rules of that movie. Never mind all the rest of the structure and the characters. But anyway, this has been fun. I think this has been a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thank you, Charlie. Thank you, audience.
Thank you.
And
we'll see you soon.